very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this Q&A on getting to carbon net zero. I'm Sarah Springford, the CEO at Brighton Chamber, and I'll be your host today. These Q&As are brought to you with the support of Barclays Eagle Labs, and I'd like to invite Naomi Muston, who is the Ecosystem Manager in Brighton, to say a few words about how Eagle Labs can help businesses. So over to you, Naomi.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all. So I do this quite often, so I'm sure most of you will know who I am. But if you don't, my name's Naomi Muston. I'm the Ecosystem Manager of the Barclays Eagle Lab in Brighton. We're one of 28 Eagle Labs now across the UK, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, supporting startup businesses as well as established businesses, really to innovate and grow. So we provide mentoring, various programs around funding. We also support with events and really just try and create connections and opportunities for the startups. So really interested to speak to any sort of tech businesses that might be looking at scaling and alternatively, just any support that you might need. I'm really looking forward to today. We do have in line with this net zero topic, we have our energy tech program that we're running in collaboration with Sellafield. So if you are in the energy tech space and are interested in growing your network and meeting a community for opportunities, then please do reach out to me. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Naomi. So I'm delighted to be able to bring together Sam, Zindel and Steve Creed to discuss today's topic. Sam is Managing Director of Propellernet, now a certified B Corp, and he is founder of Low Carbon Leaders, a consultancy helping SMEs to go further on climate change. Sam was telling me that he was also part of the first cohort to complete the new Cambridge University Business Transition to Net Zero course earlier this year. Steve is a sustainability professional and is one of the organisers of Circular Brighton and Hove. And a key aspect of the circular economy is using as little energy as possible, and that energy is renewable. During this 60-minute session, we'll discuss how easy it is for a business to achieve carbon net zero, why it's worth investing time and resources, and where to start. And I'm sure that we're going to be discussing some of the challenges too. So I'm going to start with you, Sam, and I'm going to start with asking you, what does carbon net zero mean to people running businesses?
Sarah, thank you very much for the question. So yeah, nice to see everybody on the call today. So a tiny bit of background so I can paint the answer to this question. At Propellernet, we've spent the last 12 months really digging into what net zero actually means for our business. We're a marketing agency, so we're a service sector company, which makes it slightly easier, and I'm sure we'll talk about that going forward. But for any business, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, I think net zero is something that increasingly people are being aware of, knowing that they probably need to do something about it. Some people who are quite engaged with climate change and the environment are probably, willingly wanting to do something about it. But ultimately, the headline is it's probably a bit of a headache. I think I've been speaking to quite a number of businesses in the local area over the last few months, and the most common response I get around net zero, and with me sort of banging the drum about starting to act, is that time is precious, money is tight, particularly post-pandemic, and it's the will is there, but the resources and the action isn't yet. And I think that's really common. I think most businesses are in that position, but that's not to say that it isn't on everyone's agenda at the moment, because I genuinely believe it is.
Great, thanks. Lots to come back to you on there. And Steve, can we kick off with a definition of net zero for everyone?
Right, well, net zero is really quite simple to think about, maybe quite hard to achieve. But essentially the idea is that you want to get to the point where you're balancing any carbon emissions that are part of either a region, a country, or an individual business against any carbon that you're avoiding or arranging to have extracted through things like offset, which we'll probably talk about in a minute. So essentially, it's kind of like an equation where if you emit some carbon, you have to take some action to reduce that emission or offset that emission as well. Pretty straightforward. If you think about it in a business sense, it's kind of like a P&L account, you know, where essentially on one hand, you're thinking about the costs in your business. So if you think about carbon emissions as the equivalent of costs, and you think about reduction of carbon emissions or offsetting carbon emissions as, if you like, a turnover, then the net effect is you want to get to the point where you break even so you can actually make a profit. And that's the point that we're targeting at the moment, is how can we stop our emissions from accumulating more in the environment at the moment and get us hopefully to less than 1.5 degrees by 2050.
And Sam, could you talk a bit about why is getting to carbon net zero important, and what are the benefits for smaller and medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, so once again, sort of phrase the answer to that question in two categories. I mean, anyone engaged with the environment agenda who's keeping up with the news around it can't really help but be slightly concerned with what the science is telling us. So, you know, an existential crisis would be the biggest picture view on this question. And I think when you wake up to that, it feels like acting is the only suitable way to operate. I think in the business context, it does feel slightly different because you're balancing a number of different sort of stakeholders in a business. You know, you're trying to keep the business afloat in some cases, or trying to grow a business. And often that's in conflict with environmental impact that your business might be having, depending on what service line you're in. But I think what we've now got to, you know, in a global sort of humanitarian viewpoint, there's very few people that really dispute the science. I'd be surprised if there were many on this call in particular that really dispute that climate change isn't something that our actions as the human race are impacting on. And therefore, I suppose it's breaking down the solution to this into different stages. There's the personal ownership and accountability that we all take, probably through things like recycling or switching energy tariffs within our homes. But within the business context, I think it's probably the area that has the most opportunity to act, because businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. They provide work. You know, most of us work, so therefore they're sort of the most amount of hours that we spend doing something tend to be with a business. And there's also transactions at every stage of a business. There's money flowing between suppliers, customers, and a business. And every time there's a transaction, there's an opportunity to make a decision with what happens with that transaction. And so one of the things that I've been really taken with in learning more about business transition to net zero is the opportunities for business to be part of the low carbon economy that's an inevitability that we're heading towards. You know, with things like government targets being written into law and legislation, and carbon taxes being talked about, it feels like a good time to be thinking about this and planning for it at the very least, if not acting fast, because you run the risk probably being left behind this systemic transformation we're going through, because there isn't really a way out of this other than net zero, and no one else has another viable solution to this. And because governments are on board and big business are on board, and in fact the whole financial sector is coming on board, it feels like this is a time to move with the tide and to really be getting your head into it and understanding it in the context of your own business. One final point on this, and then I'll pass back over to Steve, but is the idea that that there's a risk to your business not acting. And I think that's really key, because there's only one way that this is going, as I've mentioned. And I think if you're in a carbon intensive industry, or in what you do as a business is heavy on carbon, if you stand still and you fail to innovate either within a product or a service line, or in fact your whole business model, I think you run a risk of not really existing as a business in the longer term. And I think that's something that we really need to stare at and work quite hard on, because we wouldn't want to see, you know, a lot of losers out of the net zero journey. In many ways, we kind of need to all work together really to get there.
So legislation and carbon taxes are coming, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about what you have personally done at Propellernet, but you also mentioned your team and customers and investors. So presumably they are all now looking at?
Yeah, I think there's just momentum building. I mean, it's crescendo this year in particular because the UK is hosting COP26, the UN's climate conference, which circles the globe. It just happens to be in Glasgow this year. It means that our government in particular have put forward some incredibly ambitious targets, way beyond the science is telling us. So, 78% reduction in carbon emissions by 2035 is more than we actually need to do if you were to look at the overall picture. Now that the government has to achieve those targets somehow, and business is a huge part of the solution to achieving those targets. So, there'll be incentives, and hopefully more of those will be coming on stream soon. I've been slightly underwhelmed with the sort of funding and support available, particularly for small and medium-sized companies, but we're beginning to see that changing a little. But the other side to that, the flip side is punishment, and that comes through either taxation or legislation or new standards that are created across different sectors that you have to comply with, otherwise you won't be given a license to trade. So that's probably what the end of this decade looks like if you're not moving. So now is a great time. I mean, this is the 10 years. This is the window that everyone keeps talking about. It's a time to plan and to act. And I think what most businesses could do with is just a bit of support in how to go about it. And the questions that came through ahead of this call really speak to that. And hopefully we'll have a chance in the next half an hour to answer many of those in terms of what are the first things to do and things like that.
And Steve, over to you about the benefits of doing this.
I mean, I think that for me, at the global level, Greta Thunberg summed it up when she said, "Your house is on fire, right? You need to do something." But I don't think that's really the way in which you're going to motivate people in business to take action. I think the way it happens is that you have to realize that this is a great opportunity to think about your business in a different way. So businesses, as Sam mentioned earlier, innovation is a key component of how business operates. And businesses that are able to innovate are much more likely to survive in the long term. So if we just forget about all the challenges that we're faced with and the points that are very clear about climate change and say to yourself, how would I like my business to move forward? Why don't I take on a new challenge, like looking at it through a lens of carbon emission reduction and just see what I could do with my business? Because it will require you to look at all different aspects of your business and think about what you might do differently. And by having a slightly different approach to where you're going with those slightly new boundaries, if you like, it'll often force you to take a different route, that you're down. The classic one, I think, is where it's a bit like if there's a cabin in the middle of the woods and you always take the same trail to it, you're never going to find anything about the woods. But if you go take somebody somewhere else in the woods and say, find your way back to the cabin, you've got to find a new way back. And that new route through the woods is kind of like a new way for your business to work. And I think that's a real opportunity. And the things that you can get from that are you could get competitive advantage because you might discover something that you could do differently. Maybe you could reduce your costs. As Sam said, you could manage business risks. You might be able to, often they say improve your efficiency, but I prefer to say improve your effectiveness, because you never get to zero when you're doing efficiency. You just get some component. Whereas if you get effective, you make it straight to the point where you have to be. And then the other things are investors. You mentioned this as well. Investors see businesses that are able to innovate and manage their risks are much more likely to be worth investing in, and they'll take that into account. And they are these days in a big way. And finally, it's probably an opportunity for you to grow your business. You might discover ways of doing things you hadn't thought about, especially if you communicate with people in the same sector or possibly in your supply chain and understand what isn't competitive, but is going to help the whole sector move forward and make a difference. So there's a big opportunity there to use all those ideas and move forward, whether it's climate change or tax reduction or whatever you want to use as your driver. It's a good one, but at the moment, carbon emission is a great one to be on, because as Sam said, it's kind of like the topic of the day, and it'll probably give you a real opportunity to do something different.
I like that a lot. So it's almost an opportunity to change your business model. So Sam, could you talk a little bit about what are the risks and challenges of trying to achieve net zero in a business?
Yeah, sure. So again, zooming out to the kind of macro level, every year the World Economic Forum produces something called the Global Risk Report. which is, some of the best minds from the economy, the global economy, coming together and agreeing on where risk exists in our markets. And of course, our whole financial markets are based on risk, and so therefore flows of investment also play on that lever. And this year, for the first time in its 16-year history, the top 5 risks, all 5 were related to climate change and the impact of climate change. So this is a significant risk to the global economy. So that's the big view. When you dial that down into a 40-person marketing agency in Brighton, I guess it's how does that relate to me? And as a business leader, I feel it's a responsibility to mitigate risk, to understand the risks, predict them, and avoid the consequences of them. So climate change is a risk to me. Directly for Propellernet, it's more locked into our client base. So we work with brands across fashion, travel, e-commerce, and we have to look at our portfolio of clients and understand where does the risk lie in their business, because ultimately if they don't do well, then we don't do well either. So from our perspective, that's really the lens we look at it through. And I think there's the physical risk, which is things like severe weather events, which we're seeing possibly more in other countries than this country right now, but it's getting closer. The recent floods in Germany were really tragic to see in front of our eyes. Obviously, in the kind of heat dome above the northern stretch of America and into Canada, it is a big concern. And I suppose it's understanding, whilst those tangible extreme climate events are not on the Brighton coastline yet, they are in our supply chain coastlines, and I think that's really key as our economy is so interconnected. And so the risks of those physical events actually translate into volatility, and volatility is never good in a business. If you have a product that is manufactured out in China that you then sell over here, it's got to be made there, and then it's got to get from there to here. There's 2 risks there, because if you can't get the product you need in the time frame you need, you're going to lose business, and you're going to not live up to the level of service that your company is there to deliver for your customers. And so there's a certain risk in that. So mitigating the volatility of these events that are being directly caused by climate change is one area. And perhaps the final one I'll just mention is consumers, because I don't really like the word consumers. I mean, it sort of plays right into the hands of the climate change activist movement, because consumption in itself is quite a dirty word now, really, it feels like. And I'm a big part of the cog in the machine for that, working in marketing, so I'm fully aware of it. But actually, using that term for its truest sense, these are the people that keep businesses alive by buying things and consuming those. And the mindset of consumers is being fundamentally shifted by the news agenda, by the activist movement, by how businesses are marketing themselves, by spotlighting dirty practice and fossil fuels. And so we are seeing a slow but quickening transition away from products that are damaging to our environment. And I think it's going to be accelerated pretty fast. I believe that things like carbon labeling of products is only just over the horizon. There's talk about government mandating that within supermarkets, and in fact 2 of the biggest FMCG conglomerates in P&G and Unilever are both saying they're going to start labeling their products with a carbon emission or carbon footprint label, so that consumers can make a more informed choice. And a recent study indicated that over 80% of consumers think about the environment now as one part of their decision-making process. So there's a risk of not acting as a business in terms of losing trust, really, in your brand and how you manufacture and sell any products, or how you deliver a service, if you're not being transparent, or in fact, if you're not seen to be acting in reducing your impact on the environment. So they're just 3 areas of risk, I think, that are important and probably relevant to some people on the call today.
Yeah. And Steve, thinking about those of us on the call today, I mean, smaller businesses, it is a challenge, isn't it? Because it's the time as well involved, the time and the cost. So what can you say about that?
I think when you said, there's a real opportunity to change your business model, that's actually quite a hard thing to do, especially for a smaller business that's just established a business model. So if you've made it from a startup into a point where you've got a functioning business model and you're trying to grow it, a sudden switch to a new business model can be quite challenging. And so I think the trick is to understand, to begin with, where you are. You know, where are your opportunities to take action? There may not be that many initially, but that doesn't matter. The important thing is to take your first steps. And then the other thing, and Sam highlighted this, the reputational issues are becoming increasingly important. And so being able to tell people about those, even if they're quite small steps, you know, I mean, they're still worth taking. So we can talk about what they might be in a minute, but the point I would make is that it's not going to be possible to get to net zero in a hurry. I don't think this is a longer term program. Some of the things that you could do might give you a reasonably immediate return in terms of investment and return on investment, or maybe cut your costs almost immediately. Some of them may require a bit of investment, and you might have to wait a few years before you're going to get the return from them. But the combination of those two things mean that there is an opportunity there. And the real trick is to keep in mind that you're going on a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And the important thing is to take the first step. We were talking earlier about the Brighton Marathon and how they unfortunately measured the distance inaccurately, and it ended up being a half a kilometer longer. But when all those people started the marathon, they didn't know that they were going to do an extra half a kilometer at the end. They just put one foot in front of the other and off they went. And I think that's the way you've got to think about it. The journey may get longer or it may get easier, but the point is, if you don't start, you're going to find yourself maybe stuck on the starting line and everybody else is going to be way out there in front. And so get started. There's risks, but you'll find out about them as you go. And knowing where you are at the moment is the most important thing. That's the kind of like the baseline. We can talk about that later.
Right, thanks. And Steve, following on from that, could you give us a brief overview about where to start and what to do?
Okay, well, I'm just going to get a little bit technical now, because there's a huge amount, and there's been a few questions in there about people trying to understand all the information that's out there about net zero carbon. But the thing to understand is they actually have classified them into what they call different scopes. And this might sound tricky, but I'll change it into pretty straightforward. So basically, scope 1, we don't really need to worry about scope 1. The important thing is that that's about the emissions that you as an organization are directly responsible for. So if you're doing something that creates a carbon emission, then that's a scope 1 measure. A scope 2 measure is one where someone else is creating energy for you and you're using it. So if your electricity is generated by a carbon source of some sort and creating carbon emissions, that would be a scope 2. And then everything else, which is quite a lot, falls into what is called scope 3. And that's the things that you indirectly buy. So, you know, if you're buying a lot of things that have a lot of packaging on them, then that's an issue for you in carbon. It could be how you're using things, how you manufacture stuff, or it could be something to do with what happens to your product after you've sold it to your customers. And Sam's point earlier about consumers, I mean, I have a little bee in my bonnet about that. Customers is a good thing to talk about, but I like to think about people as being citizens who make their decisions based on everyone when they buy something, not just on themselves, which is kind of what a consumer implies. So, you know, let's either be customers where we're making comparisons, or even better, citizens where we're thinking about everybody when we make those purchases if we're doing it. So that's kind of where I would start. So if we think about scope 1, what might that be? Well, you know, scope 1 could be thinking about moving into, I don't know, switching off lights, reducing the amount of energy you're using. Could switch the light. You could have those sensors that measure when people are in the room, and if nobody moves for a while, they all go out. Bit frustrating, but it does save money immediately. You could turn off all your computers at night if you have lots of computer screens. There's the whole issue of storing all that information, like those huge email nets that might be somewhere on the cloud. So things like that come into it. And then the other thing is you could think about possibly using electric vehicles. We talked about this earlier, but you could do electric vehicles. Scope 2 might be, well, why don't you just switch to buying all your energy from a renewable source? I mean, nowadays it's net zero, it's probably not any additional cost. So it would be net cost to you, and you could get to net carbon zero a little quicker by using something like that. And then scope 3, well, that's much more challenging. That's all about the products that you might be selling, and you need to think a bit. We can talk more about that. But I mean, I think the thing I find really interesting that highlights the scope 3 for me the most is, I don't know if you know it or not, but Tottenham Hotspur has been rated as the greenest football organization in the Premier League. And on the 19th of September, they're planning to have a net zero premier match, the first of its kind, with Chelsea. And this is all about a combination of using zero carbon emission buses to take the teams to the event, but also it's about encouraging their fans to use public transport or ride their bicycle to the stadium, pick food that has a low carbon emission to it, don't throw the waste away in the same way, recycle more. And so they've kind of found a way in which, you know, football is an interesting, I'm not a huge person coming from Canada, I never really grew up with it, but football is something that does influence people. And the fact that the major Premier Football League is going to invest this amount of effort in having a net zero match shows that they're interested in a huge extent off into their scope 3. Now, a small business can't do that, but there might be some ideas in there that you could steal and use for yourself.
Great, thank you. I mean, it's a huge topic, and obviously we could spend all day talking about each one of those scopes with you both. Sam, I'd really like to ask you to give us a brief overview of what you've done at Propellernet, because you've taken this on as a very personal challenge, haven't you? And you've done a lot in a short space of time. So could you give us an overview of what you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll sort of take you on a bit of a journey because it might resonate with some of the people on the call who are in similar businesses. I mentioned at the start, we're in the service sector. So already we don't have a very dirty industrial process. We don't manufacture products or distribute them around the country. So in that way, we're quite close to zero. But I didn't know how close to zero we are when I first started paying attention to our environmental impact just over a year ago. And I've been reading up a lot, and it often talks about a linear process to go through. So the first thing you might want to do is measure your carbon footprint. And Steve's just articulated there how you do that. You would need to measure across scopes 1, 2, and 3. There are many companies that offer that service. So we look to engage with a third party that can come in, ask for data, and then they give us our footprint. But it gets quite complicated quite quickly, quite technical. There's areas of gray, I would say, in those calculations. And so we actually ripped up the linear kind of, measure your footprint, then reduce it as much as you can, and then offset the bit that you can't offset. I mean, that's really how you get to net zero in a nutshell, is those three things is sort of what you're told to do. We sort of ripped up that linear process and just thought, well, we want to do something right now. So rather than paying money to get our carbon footprint measured and then working, almost waiting for that and then doing something, we looked into different sort of climate solutions, if you like. So things that you can do that will help with the climate without necessarily having to change a great deal in your business straight away. And the most obvious of those is planting trees. No doubt everybody here is aware of the benefits of planting trees in terms of the amount of carbon that they're able to draw down from the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere over the lifetime of the tree. There are many debates around longevity, additionality, and various other technical bits, but no one is disputing the idea that planting trees doesn't help the environment, as long as you plant the right trees in the right place with an accredited project, because that's key. And so we started researching that area, and actually what we decided to do first was to set a vision for the business, a bold vision, ambitious, that felt like it was hard to achieve, but exciting to go on, and create energy around that vision. So before we knew what our carbon footprint was, or had it got into our heads around the greenhouse gas protocol and science-based targets and all these other areas that can seem quite overwhelming and confusing, we announced to the business that we were going to plant 1 million trees. And just said that's what we were going to do, and we were going to do as quickly as we could do it. And we'd found the right partner, a company, brilliant platform called Ecology, which partner with global reforestation projects. So they help fund those projects that are often in the right places to plant trees. So the majority of the trees we're planting in our quest to 1 million trees is in Madagascar. They are mangroves, which sequester 4 times as much carbon as many native trees in this country. They also provide, jobs and support for local communities in the developing world. So we love everything about these projects. They have so many byproducts. And of course, what you're also doing with reforestation on a global basis is you're restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, which is not directly related to drawing down carbon. We're talking on this call about net zero, but there's much bigger problems in many ways with this whole debate than just getting to net zero. We've got to help restore biodiversity and the ecosystems that support life on the planet and protect from flooding and provide the soil for our food and all those kind of systems that we just take for granted because we're just so used to not having to deal with them unless we're actively farming, I suppose. So we set our sights on this bold plant 1 million trees. We're a small company. It felt like quite a big thing. We'd seen some large companies doing similar volumes of trees. And so we've just planted our 200,000th tree in 11 months. So we've really kind of attacked this and are on track to now do this by the end of 2023, which is where we set a deadline for ourselves. So that feels great. And I can't tell you what that did for engagement in our business with a team that work here, with a simple to use platform that we've been sort of surfacing. Every time someone joins our business, we plant 500 trees in their name. Every time we win a new client, we plant 1,000 trees in their name. We've now baked trees basically almost like currency into the way that we operate as a business. And even though it might not be the 100% best thing to do, I know that protecting the trees that are there is probably slightly better than planting new trees. So we're doing a bit of that too now. But what it did is it created a vision and it galvanized our team around climate action. And I do think that's a great first step to take, even if you know nothing about it. And at the time I felt I didn't have much knowledge on the subject really compared to where I've got to now. Having landed that, it then became very easy to sort of then make magic things happen. So one of the things we then encouraged the team to do was to invest a small proportion of their salary each month into climate action. We called it a pension for the planet because it works in a similar way to a pension, because our team put a minimum of £4 a month into our climate action fund, and then the company matches that. And if they want to put more than that, the company will match whatever they want to put in. And so that really kind of made it tangible. And the idea behind that was helping to also help offset, if you like, the lives of our team, beyond where they come to work, but just generally. So that was another really big step, which again, it's all about engagement, energy, and helping our vision. So they were the key first steps. I guess once we then got a bit more granular, I went on a course, so I did my research. I took some time out of work to actually go and study and really get my head into it and understand what net zero meant for us as a business and strategically for us as a business. And then that became quite easy to land, because I realized, having studied it a bit more, about some of the opportunities that Steve mentioned there, about the inevitability of the low carbon economy and how actually you want to be part of it, and actually a pioneering part would be a great place to exist. So we've done that, and as a result, some of the new businesses we're working with, we just won a new brand, Superdry, who at the moment aren't where they want to be, but they've set their sights on becoming the most sustainable listed fashion brand by 2030. So they're looking at circularity and closed loop production and organic and sustainable cotton and everything you could care to mention. And so we sort of won that business in a way on the back of the fact that we were aligned very well with their sustainability goals. And I think they're one of many larger brands and companies that are really pursuing this and know they're not where they need to be, but ultimately really actively seeking the answers to some of these. So I know that the business has benefited from us sort of taking this quite, you would say radical, I think, compared to many businesses approach, the million tree plan. And actually, since targeting 1 million trees, have been a founding partner along with Beck at Create, who's on this call, and a few others, something called the Million Tree Pledge, which we've launched for SMEs to take part in. And I guess it's just sort of shortcutting to how you would get to do that by speaking to some of us that are doing it, and we can help advise on how you might do it. Thanks, Beck's just shared a link to that in the chat. So now we're also adopting this idea of influencing other businesses, which I think is a key part of the net zero journey. And just one final thing, I suppose, just to go right back to the bit I said at the beginning. Net zero is defined as knowing what your carbon footprint is, reducing your emissions, and then offsetting the bit that's left to get to zero. I think for many businesses, that's actually quite an achievable target, particularly if you balance it with quite a large offset, which we wouldn't recommend as being the main thing. I am increasingly talking about going beyond net zero and really being a pioneer in the journey towards a resilient climate. I've been talking about it as sub-zero or beyond net zero, and it's gaining a lot of attention and momentum around that idea that if you can get to net zero faster than 2050, which is what the science tells us we need to do, then actually why wouldn't you go further? You're only going to help mitigate the risks that we all face even further. And I think we feel that we have an opportunity to do it. Our carbon footprint, now we have measured it, which was another step in the journey. I've got the report here. Is 75 tons of equivalent carbon in our business annually. We've rounded that up to 100 to just account to a little bit more, but I mentioned we're a service sector business that doesn't travel internationally or do anything too polluting. So it's a very small amount of carbon in the grand scheme of the gigatons of greenhouse gases that we're all trying to grapple with in the atmosphere. So our opportunity isn't net zero. Our opportunity is to go way past net zero into something that you would call either negative emissions or climate positive. There's different ways of describing it. And I think there's actually an opportunity for businesses that really want to take the lead on this to adopt that position. And it's a very exciting and engaging thing. That's why I'm on this call and was invited to speak. We're just doing stuff and it's very needed right now to have lots of stories like this to be able to tell and to raise the ambition of everyone that's engaged in this. And if there was one piece of advice I would give you to round this whole little piece off is do something now without knowing anything. You could plant a tree, and I can send you a link to where to do it for the best value in the best place in the world. Do it and see where that gets you, because what you'll suddenly feel is that there is a tangible climate action happening. And that for us was a great launch pad to then go on this journey, which has involved becoming a certified B Corp and various other things that we've really gone for. But actually that very first small step of feeling like you're doing something, because it doesn't half get the monkey off your back with how overwhelming the situation feels when you read the news, because you feel like you're contributing all of a sudden, and it's a complete shift in mindset when it happens.
That's great. And you've alluded there, Sam, too, about actually changing some of the ways that you do things. So, for example, looking at your digital footprint and reducing actually do things.
Yeah, great. So yeah, thanks for the nudge on that. I meant to mention it. So yeah, I suppose, the number one thing that you need to do on a credible net zero plan is to reduce your carbon emissions. It's not plant 1 million trees. So that was just our vision that got us going. But the actual thing we really need to be doing is reducing emissions, because we can't just plant trees to get out of this. And so we've looked at you mentioned scope 3, Steve, being, the tricky one. Well, 92% of our carbon footprint is in scope 3. All right, it's almost all of it. And so what we are doing bit by bit is we're looking at our suppliers. We're about to engage in sort of dialogue and workshops with them. What we don't want to do is to, let's just call them suppliers, because I think that's just the easiest way to think about scope 3 from our business perspective, at least anyway. These are people that we buy products and services from in order to run our business. So we need to look at which of those have the heaviest sort of impact on our carbon footprint and engage with them. And we're not of the mind to sort of say, our carbon footprint's X, you contribute Y, we're going to switch to a greener alternative. What we've decided to do is a far more collaborative way of operating, letting them know that they are in our carbon footprint first and foremost, because they might not be aware that this is how you calculate carbon footprints, and then saying, we're going on a journey with this and we want you to come too. So let's think about how we could change how we work together, how you supply your goods and services to us. For number one, for our cloud space, does the data center you use exist on, is it powered by renewable energy? Because there are competitors of yours that are, and encouraging them to think, okay, because a few nudges like that, they're going to act, I think. And so we're not sort of beating them up. We're just saying we're going on a journey with this and we want to go with you, and we still want to use you because you're the best at what you do. But this is now a decision-making factor for us. And I think if you dial that right the way up to big business, this is one of the things that's going to have the biggest impact on small and medium-sized businesses. It's that point of view, but coming from I don't know, yeah, Procter & Gamble, I mentioned them earlier, or IKEA, or one of your biggest accounts, if you work in the world like I do, the government, the UK government will no longer offer a contract to anyone without a science-based net zero plan that they can show as part of the procurement process. And that's becoming normalized, really. I think most large businesses now have to declare their carbon footprint. And so they are saying to all of their suppliers, big and small, and for many of us, they are the biggest earners or the biggest revenue streams are larger companies than ourselves. They are increasingly going to ask you, how do you contribute to my carbon footprint? Because your scope 1 and 2 is part of my scope 3. So we've got to work this out, because I don't want to take on a company that has a really heavy carbon footprint and isn't doing anything about it. And I think we're going to have those conversations increasingly. They call it sort of reaching down into the supply chain or the value chain of a business. And this is going to be led by larger businesses that have this declaration requirement, and it's going to pull all of the SMEs up with them, because you've got to prove that you're on this journey too, because the large companies have got a chief sustainability officer who's seeing the low carbon economy as the only future. So, you know, if we're not on board with it, our businesses will have to, so that we're not a big contributor. And I think we've approached that at our level, looking at things, you know, just basics, office supplies. Where are they coming from? Why are you delivering them from Newcastle? Is there a local depot we could get them from? Or actually, could you partner with a local provider? Or, you know, it's just thinking about it like that. And bit by bit, we're going to chip away. And our goal is to halve our emissions by the end of 2023. So we've, you know, the science says by 2030, halving emissions. The UK government says 78% by 2035. So all of us have really got to look at that target, but we're thinking 50% by the end of the year after next, which for us feels ambitious and challenging and exciting to try.
Well, it's very, very helpful to all of us, because you've done a lot of thinking about it already. So it's great to be hearing about that. And you mentioned Beck Kimber, and Hannah's posted their link to another event that we've got coming up on how to reduce your digital carbon footprint, which have a look at that, because that'll be really helpful as well, and it'll be focusing on your website as well. Steve, I wanted to ask you if you could perhaps share a few places where help that businesses could tap into. Have you got some thoughts?
I can do that, but before we go there, just a quick one. Sam's point about working in your supply chain is really quite interesting, because a lot of people know about offset, which is the concept of you're kind of going to pay some money somewhere to have a tree planted, which is great. I'm not against that. But the whole concept of working in your supply chain, especially with bigger organizations, is really interesting, because people like, say, Ben & Jerry's, for example, invested in their dairy providers' separation of their manure systems to reduce their carbon emissions, so that they actually used money from their organization to help someone in their supply chain reduce their carbon emissions. And then they were able to claim a reduction in their carbon emissions, as Sam's highlighted in the Scope 3 side. And so where you're at is, if you're a smaller business and you're thinking like this, there may be an opportunity to introduce the idea of inset rather than offset, and possibly access some funding that might allow you to take action that would help further up the supply chain reduce their carbon emissions. So there's like an interesting little business opportunity in there somewhere that you might want to just think about. So it's quite a, you know, there's a lot of opportunity in all this when you think about it. I mean, Ben & Jerry's invested a lot of money in their supply chain, and I think they were I can't remember, but I think they're owned by one of the very large organizations, because they sold out, but we won't go there. So where can you get help? I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, my suggestion is take a look at the Carbon Trust website. They've got loads of information there that'll help you understand more about how you can do it. There's a small, where else am I? There's the Green Growth Platform, which is run out of Brighton University, which could give you some help. There's Coast to Capital. They've got a net zero target for our planet group. And then I think the other thing I would look at is also the SME Climate Hub, which I think Sam's also aware of, but they have a pledge there, but they also have a huge set of resources that you can go into and quickly identify where you might want to start. Lots of how to, if you like, manuals that you could pick up quickly, have a look at, and decide how easy it would be or hard it would be for you to do your baseline. I mean, the biggest trick in getting a baseline right is sort of knowing where to look for the bits of information you need in order to know where your baseline is. And some of these guides are great at just giving you really quick advice of where you can go to do it. And then there's also organizations like Bioregional. I mean, they did Brighton 1, which is that development of property next to the railway station, where they've created almost a net zero operation. They've got their, they use a wood chip burner to heat the group, sharing their heating systems, all kinds of things like that. So they've got lots of examples of how you can go about meeting a net zero opportunity, and they're very, very helpful as well. They've got I think they've got a 10-step program that you can use to think about being sustainable, not just net zero, but there's a lot of good stuff in there about net zero as well. So several places you can go and have a look.
And we'll be sharing these with everyone afterwards. Sam, you've had access to a lot of help. Anything to add to that, Liz?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, but so I was really excited to see that a company called Planet Mark, who are brilliant sustainability consultants helping businesses on a transition to net zero, have just launched a partnership with Google to provide an online training for net zero planning and delivery of net zero. The first one hasn't happened yet. I think it's next month. I can find the details so that we can circulate it. I thank you, Hannah. And they, so that's the first. I think there has been a gap, to be completely honest. I mean, Steve's rattled off there a number of different resources, but I don't think anyone's been aware of them. And actually, some of them aren't quite mature yet, I wouldn't think. The SME Climate Hub is pretty good, but it's quite confusing when you first try and access it. And I think there's a gap in the market. There's a brilliant company called Small 99 as well, who I'm working quite closely with, who are specifically there to help micro businesses. So I think it's maximum of 6 or 9 employees that they're working with, really small companies, to help them with this. And they offer some great consultancy and cutting corners to get to the really high impact, low time and cost constraint elements of net zero. So I'd recommend speaking to them. Also, without wanting to get on a sales plug, but I'm with the Low Carbon Leaders Network that I'm managing. I'm also helping businesses, at least just having an informal chat to start with about what you're up to and where you're there. So please, reach out if I can follow up this call with a quick conversation to set you off in the right direction, because there may be something specific to you that we can't cover on this call.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I think there's there is actually quite a lot happening in Brighton and surrounding area, and we'll be sharing with everyone after. There's some grant funding and support coming along from LOCAS and the innovation project that the universities are running called RISE. So we'll share both of those as well for everyone to have a look at. We thought we might just have a quick poll with everybody, actually. We want to check out your attitude towards signing up to reducing carbon, signing up to a pledge. And there are quite a few around. And Steve mentioned one called the UK Business Climate Hub Pledge. So, Hannah, are you able to launch the poll for us? And just ask you to... It's really just a quick poll to see how everybody's thinking at the moment, and could be useful in helping us decide what steps to take next. So I think, Hannah, we're almost there. You could publicise that, and everybody can see that there's quite a big winner, which is yes. Can everybody see the results now? Yeah. So you can see yes, willing to sign, which is great, isn't it? So thank you for that. We're coming to the time where we're going to need to wrap up shortly. A couple of things to let everybody know about before I ask Steve and Sam for their final thoughts, and just see if there's any final questions. For those of you who are new to Brighton Chamber, we are a not-for-profit independent membership organisation with the aim of helping people who are running businesses. If you found today's session useful, do check out the events calendar. There's a wide variety of in-person and online events coming up, including those in the countryside. And if you'd like to find out more about how the Chamber could help, then get in touch with us and we'll arrange to give you a call. On climate change, we have a number of events and get-togethers coming up over the coming months. We've mentioned already the Reducing Your Digital Footprint, led by Beck Kimber, CEO at Create, which is on the 27th of October. We've got a get-together of members who are active in looking at sustainability and want to work together to help others, coming up next month. And our next Construction Voice event for the construction and property sector is focusing on sustainability. Steve mentioned the electric car rally, which is has been rescheduled and is taking place on Saturday in Brighton. Steve's actually taking part, and there's a lot to see, and we'll be sending some details to you in the follow-up email in case you fancy going and watching that. So Steve and Sam, can I ask you, perhaps Sam, you first, could I ask you for any final thoughts?
Absolutely, and I'd like to try and tick off there's about 10 or so questions that came in before the session, and I was just asked one there as well.
Go for it.
What's the first thing to do? How, what are the simple steps? What are the things that might have the biggest impact? I'm not going to give you one answer that Laura's asking, but I'm going to give you 4, because I think there are 4 things that you could probably do now that might either save you money, make you money, or engage everyone in your team in whatever size business you're operating in. The first thing is, if you're not on a renewable energy tariff for your office and you have an office, then switch right now. You could use a newly local company called Bulb Energy, who are a B Corp and are brilliant at what they do. And the customer service is exceptional compared to any other energy company I've used. They are 100% renewable, and they are cheaper than most tariffs that are not renewable. Just do it. That's a very simple thing. It could save you money, and it will have quite a significant impact on your carbon footprint for an office footprint. You could extend that into wherever you're working remotely as well, and encourage your team to do that. That's probably the next stage for that. We're working on that at the moment too. That's number 1. Number 2, look at your pensions plan, if you have one for your company, and perhaps who you bank with, because they are the biggest investors in fossil fuels, and it requires only a Google to tell you who the best bet is to move to. And I would suggest that the smartest investments right now are in line with a low carbon future economy. And so you'll actually stand to make a better return on your pension plan if you're not investing in a fossil fuel heavy portfolio. So that's definitely another area to look at that you could do quite quickly. And the third thing is engaging everyone with a bold pledge or target. I mean, it could be as simple as just, the science net zero by 2050, but maybe, sorry, David. Yeah, an Ecosia search rather than a Google search would actually be more appropriate in this instance. That's a great point. Nice, 1-0. And so I would, engage your team, because you are a busy business leader, probably if you're on this call, or certainly quite senior in your business. You cannot manage this by yourself unless you're a sole trader, and therefore you have no option. Engage people. I will guarantee, if you don't know already, there will be a few people in your team who are really engaged in climate action and climate change, and possibly some of the younger new entrants to the business will be the most engaged. So use that energy and more stuff will happen quicker. So really engage them with a bold thing. We want to do something about this and we're going to go big. That's a great start to a sentence around this, I would suggest. And the final thing is invest in natural climate restoration. This is a pay-to-play area. You feel good about it. It's helping the global challenge, and it's something you could do tomorrow for 12p a tree with ecology as a mangrove in Madagascar. So this is not cost prohibitive. That's why we're able to plant 1 million of these trees in 3 years. It's something you can do very quickly, and it will just get the ball rolling and get that story around the business that you are acting. And as I say, it was the catalyst really for us to go on this journey.
Great, thank you very much. Some really good first steps there. Change your energy provider. Tick. Steve, any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think Sam's highlighted 4 great steps, and I would, the important thing is to take a step. So do something. That's the most important thing. But then the second thing I would suggest is, once you've done it, celebrate a bit. When you're making a bit of a change, get everybody together, celebrate the fact you've done something different. Don't try to do it all at once. Don't get overpowered by the challenges. Take small steps, take Sam's advice about the simple things that are easy to do, and then make sure when, if you've planted 100 trees or 500 trees or whatever makes sense to you, get everybody together and have a little celebration about the number of trees you've planted. Make it a positive, fun thing. It's not a negative thing here. This is a really great positive opportunity that you can take forward. So that would be my suggestion.
Just on that, Steve, sorry, I know we're desperately running out of time, but there's a great story just to tell you about our tree planting. So one of the things I did to try and engage the team even deeper with this million tree pledge, and as we were progressing against that target, was I spoke to ecology, and they told me the amount of space these trees need and take up. And then I took that and I coloured in a Google map of Brighton and Hove with all the open spaces as our tree planting, because it's quite intangible. Madagascar isn't somewhere any of us have been in Propellernet, and so it's hard to really see what's the scale of this tree planting. A million sounds like a lot, but what does it actually mean? And every company meeting, I show the map with a new area coloured in. And so at the moment, we've got to Preston Park's full, Hove Park's full, the whole of Hove lawns are full. The level is full. We're filling up open spaces in Brighton with the amount of tree planting we do. And I encouraged the team. In fact, we took everyone to Preston Park for a social when we couldn't meet indoors. And I said, just look at the size of this park. We've already planted this area with trees. This is what we're doing. It's really bold and it's exciting. And trying to keep making those kind of stories and telling stories and engaging people in the vision in new ways is really exciting. People you'd be surprised, how willing people are to then give time and effort and energy behind these various things. And I think, being imaginative with this and playful is really important as well, because it's quite an overwhelming topic.
Totally. So stories make it all happen. That's the trick, make it real.
So we've come to the end of today's session. Please join me in saying a really big thank you to Sam and Steve. And I'm sure you'll all agree that we want to invite them back for a follow-up session very, very soon. It's been really useful, interesting and helpful. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sam